Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Thrive Live. I'm happy to bring in Jason Walker. We have an incredible guest for you to meet today, and let's see who Jason's brought in for us. Jason.
Hi, Beth. Greetings from Austin, Texas. How are you today?
I'm great. It's pretty warm in Katy, Texas right now, and I think no matter what time of year you're watching, it's probably still going to be
Katy, Texas. Pretty warm in Austin too. So it's a hot one. So we have a great guest today. I'm super excited to bring somebody on that I've known for many years now. Amy Cappellanti-Wolf, who was Symantec's global human resources leader. She was a senior vice president there. Amy has 30 years of experience helping businesses adjust, endure change, and develop outbound ideas for growth. Amy knows what companies should optimize in their business and what employees need to do to attain true success in a corporation. Amy has held vital human resources roles at large corporations like Cisco Systems, where I work with her, and many other established organizations. Amy has developed innovative leadership programs and processes. She helps transform businesses with exceptional guidance and insight. She's an incredibly thoughtful and accessible leader, which is really important in these times. Absolutely. She's really genuinely empathetic. She's one of the nicest people that you will ever meet. And we're really happy to have on Thrive Live my friend Amy. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, Jason. Amy. Thank you. Hi, Beth. Thank you so much. And thank you for the wonderful introduction. I loved working with you at Cisco. We both learned so much while we were there, and I've applied so much of it since I've left Cisco. So it's great to reconnect.
Yeah, it was a great learning lab. So definitely learned a lot. So I wanted to jump in, and one of the first things I wanted to talk to you about is an article that you recently wrote about elevating your game amid change. And there was a discussion about meditation practices that you use. So in challenging times right now, we're all trying to be more calm in any way we can. Could you tell us a little bit about meditation and how that's helping, how that can help us be more calm in these situations and with what's going on in the world today?
Absolutely. And, you know, I grew up in prayer, having been raised in spiritual upbringing, but I didn't realize how close prayer and meditation are together. And so it's fairly easy as you become very busy in your work life and your family life that you forget to do some of the things that you're brought up in, which is really being focused and intentional. And it's really hard to do that with all of the normal things happening in life. And then you add on pandemic, you add on racial injustice, you add on whether it's forest fires or floods or hurricanes. There's just so many things to deal with right now. And so I went back to some roots of meditation, which I started roughly about 10 years ago in a much more structured way. And I started thinking about, wouldn't there be a great opportunity to start to talk about meditation as a real business differentiator versus something that we do on our private time, which led me to write this article because I have done lots of research in addition to only practicing on myself, and began to realize that meditation is a really great way to, drop all judgment, to really listen and improve how you come across in terms of empathy, and really to kind of just stop and the noise that's in our heads every day, and put that aside to be really focused. And I think it has real personal impact, but also helps you bring your best self to work and family life every day. And it can be used as a way to really engage with people right now, which is probably the most important thing to do in light of the fact that all of us are in our homes or workplaces that feel kind of isolated. So this article was kind of an act of love to try and share what I've learned in my personal journey and put it into a business context as another tool that we can leverage as we think about the new world that we work in.
Yeah, it was a great article, and I actually learned a lot. So I'd encourage everybody to go out and read it. So one of the things that you just talked about was empathy. And that's been talked a lot about lately as a now valued skill set with leaders over the last several years. And now with social issues, that's even a more crucial soft skill. Can you discuss how important or what you believe empathy brings to leaders?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's something that we learn as kids, right? In fact, I remember when I sent my young daughters, who are now, 18 and 14, to school, and one of the things they began talking about was empathy and really how to make certain the kids understand that you need to understand what somebody else is dealing with before you react to them. And as a young child, you don't really, you understand it, but you don't really begin to apply it until you get older. And so it's an old value that I think we've all probably been taught, but now more than ever, it's becoming really critical for us to practice. And I think it's really easy to say, well, that's not my issue, that's their issue. And it's an easy way to dismiss perhaps something that you want to step into because you don't feel like you are either have the permission to be empathetic, or you maybe don't feel comfortable being empathetic because you've never walked in their shoes. But it's really important right now, especially in light of all things I just described. And I think when you're empathetic, you're first of all, you're suspending judgment. You're being more authentic to that person to really understand what they're going through and not necessarily put forth your perspectives on how they should be feeling. And it does kind of free you a bit because it takes away maybe some of the principles and judgments that you've grown up with in your past and really sort of allow you to open up your embouchure to understand what somebody else is going through. And that's everything from, the notion of I'm working at home while I'm, having children to raise and having to homeschool them for younger parents to I've lost my job. I can't pay my rent, yet I'm a good person, so don't judge me. To, people that have not had a voice. And it's so easy to say, well, they just have to work hard and they'll get that voice. We have to create access for people to get that voice. And that requires you to be empathetic and to step out of perhaps your comfort zone to do things that in the past you might have said, well, they'll have to figure it out on their own. So it's something I feel is a gift for us. And for those people who really are aware of it, it would be a huge game changer if we start to practice more of it in this world.
Absolutely. In the article, Elevating Your Game Image Change, you wrote about something that's really important right now, which is dropping assumptions. And I think that's something we're all trying to work hard to do right now. So can you tell us how we get better at dropping assumptions?
Well, I would say, first of all, meditation is a great way because it makes you suspend thinking about things and really getting close to the core of what's on your mind and really accepting it, whether it's thinking or feeling, but also knowing kind of when to open up your perspective on things. But I would say that, dropping assumptions is about sort of stop advocating for your own ideas. And I worked with this great guy at Symantec, and I'll give him a shout out, Jim Gemmell, who's a really seasoned executive at General Electric and at Intuit and then at Symantec. And he ran Total Rewards for me, and as well as many other things. And he was a sage mentor to me. And, he would always say, be in the inquiry stage, ask questions. Is if you come in advocating for something that you think is really important, you may lose sight of other ideas that come into play that might be a better solution than what you thought of. And I've always thought about the time when you're sitting around a table and you've got, everybody nodding their heads and agreeing, and there's one person in the corner either not agreeing or not even, sharing their perspective. And I always wanted to know what's on their mind because they may see something that we don't see. And so groupthink can lead to, consensus ideas that are perhaps mediocre, whereby if you can just drop the assumptions and have a really robust conversation and not have any sort of judgments or preconceived perspectives, you're going to get to better business solutions. And that's not only in business, that's in life, because we all get attached to our own perspectives. And now more than ever, you got to open that up a bit, because we cannot continue to work against our own assumptions because the world has changed too much, and your old assumptions don't work in the new world.
Absolutely. One of the things that I was really struck by in your articles is that you were really transparent and honest in those articles, and it's really a hard skill set to do in today's day and age, is to really put yourself out there. How did you develop the skill of being really transparent and honest?
Well, it's funny because that's everyone who knows me says, you know where you stand with Amy. She's super direct and open, and also unafraid to admit when she's got it wrong. And I think I learned this early on. I grew up in Morgantown, West Virginia. It's a college town about an hour south of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's about maybe 50,000 people before students come, and about 75, 80,000 when the students are around. So I grew up in a very humble middle-class family. My dad owned his own restaurant. My parents worked there, and each of us worked there. I've told her sisters. But my dad was raised Italian, grew up Italian, first generation. And so he was very direct and open and honest. And my mom was more genteel, but also got her point across. And so in the culture by which I grew up in, we were very honest and open. We didn't pull punches, direct. And also we really celebrated honesty, authenticity. I mean, you just couldn't fake your way through West Virginia, especially Morgantown. So I think I learned early on, bred that way, growing up in that way, that was how I would be. And then funny is I did most of my first stints working on the East Coast in Atlanta, in Orlando, and then in Texas with Frito-Lay and PepsiCo. Then I went back to Orlando with Disney. And then my husband and I moved out to California in 2000. And I was struck with the lack, and went into technology for the first time. And I was struck with the lack of directness when I went into Silicon Valley. I experienced, and still do to a certain extent, a lot of passive aggressiveness. And so I think when I first came out here, I'm like, wow, they're not saying what they really feel. And I began to distrust people. And then I think I was perceived as, boy, she's super direct. But I was gonna adapt as I needed to, but I wasn't gonna change who I was, because that's ended up being something that's been my winning formula for me around, you can always go to Amy and get the straight answer. And if she doesn't know it, she doesn't know it. So it's something that's probably sets me aside from other folks in HR or in business, but that's just how I was raised. And right now it really works, because people want transparency. They don't want to be lied to. When you start to not be honest with folks, or be less, reticent to share what's happening, then people begin to feel like you don't trust them. They're not adults. They can't take what you got to tell them. And so I think it's disrespectful not to be direct. And there's ways to couch it so you don't, damage somebody by virtue of being direct. But I think it's out of respect and commitment and investment in that person that you are direct, because keeping them guessing or telling them something they want to hear versus what would help them to be better is really not doing them a good service.
Well, it's a courageous skill set, and it's a super important skill set to have right now. And so we all need to try to model that a lot more than we are. In the article that you wrote about culture and strategy, you discussed two companies that had fast change cultures, and that changed culture pretty quickly. One that I'm familiar with, Cisco, with its M&A strategy, and then the remaking of the Microsoft culture. Can you talk to us about best practice for culture change in rapidly evolving situations, and how we handle that, and how we take that on as HR professionals and other business professionals?
Absolutely. And I'm super passionate about this. I mean, I've been through so many iterations of let's go, transform the culture. Let's go make this a better place to work. And they always started with values. And so you get everybody together and you talk about values. You work really hard to wordsmith them. And then you put them on posters and on websites and on hiring platforms. They never stuck. And they ended up being these posters that sat in the hallways, but were never really adhered to. And it largely became, for me, the big learning was two things. One is say-do ratio. If as a leader or an employee, you're adhering to the values we've all put forth, then you have to be accountable to those. So every decision you make, every conversation you have that are counter to those values, your say-do ratio goes down. And as I mentioned in my previous response, transparency and honesty and accountability is really important right now. So saying what you're going to go do and doing it is most critical, especially now when everyone's under a veil of perhaps mistrust or concern about their own careers or their livelihoods. The other thing I think that was missed out in the past was tying the culture to the business strategy. And I know we've heard, time and time again, Peter Drucker's famous comment about, culture eats strategy for breakfast. But it really comes to light when you're trying to bring those two together. And I'll give you a great example. So at Symantec, we had several CEO transitions, and every time a new CEO would come in, they'd want to create a new cultural statement. And so we try and restart, and then it would either, fail or it would sustain for a while, but never have a long lasting adherence to what we were trying to do. And so on the last go around, what I did is I actually worked with this great company called LSA. Tris is this terrific partner to me. And we approached it through business strategy, because at the time at Symantec, we had a very smart, capable CEO in relationship to cybersecurity, domain expertise, and also kind of a vision and strategy. But what was happening was a lot was in his head, which is not uncommon for visionary leaders, but it wasn't getting translated into action for his leaders and beneath. And so he and I would go toe to toe about, I don't think people can articulate the strategy as is in your head. And he would get frustrated with me to say, well, they're idiots, or, they don't understand the business. And I'm saying, this is not like people in IT, finance, HR that aren't in there in a BU. These are actually your business leaders. So through the veil of the culture work, I said, let's all get together around a table and let's get really clear about what the strategy is. And it was a fascinating, facilitated discussion, because it came to light that a lot of people didn't really understand the strategy and were challenging it, which was actually super helpful for my CEO to see, because he began to realize, oh, these people aren't dumb. They do have questions about the strategy, and the way I've articulated it needs to be more expansive and more specific. And they also are asking questions I hadn't thought about or was not aware that there needed to be clarity around. So by virtue of starting with the strategy, we got that really clear. And then from that, we began to talk about what's the kind of culture that you need. And I'll give you an example. If you think about being an innovative company that's like to market fast, right? A bleeding edge, that would be an Apple. On the other end of the spectrum, you'd have a Dell. Now, their cultures aren't right or wrong, but Dell's around optimization, really, running a tight ship with low margins. And so they're going to be in the other end of innovation in terms of product innovation, but they're going to be more in managing a business very tightly, where Apple will have a much different culture. Neither one is right or wrong, but the capabilities and the culture you're building is going to be different, right? You're not going to look at people who are taking lots of risks and failing fast in Dell, but you're going to be looking at that in Apple. So what we did is we tried to create, what are the things that Symantec needs to be focusing on from a strategy perspective, and then what kind of culture do you need? And so we came up with like 3 things. One was, we're going to be, much more bleeding edge in terms of getting out to market faster on products. We're going to be focusing more externally, because we've been focusing a lot internally on our own ways of how we worked. It didn't mean we didn't continue to do that, but we were losing the customer. We weren't clear about what the customer wanted. And that manifested itself with named accounts and how many you actually had, and were you really being intimate with the customer, to our consumer business, which is are using technology so that the consumer feels like, you know me, but we're leveraging technology because you had so many more consumers on your platform than enterprise businesses. So we started to actually wrap it around the strategy of the business to the kind of culture that you needed. And that was the first time I started to see this thing stick, in that it wasn't just a set of values on a piece of paper. They were actually statements that supported and enabled the culture. And then it allowed you to understand when there were gaps or misfires, it was because people weren't aligned to the strategy. And that was probably the best time I've ever seen a culture and strategy session come together, or process come together. And to me, last thing I'll say on this is that culture is not an initiative. So when people kick off these culture initiatives, they've already missed the game. Culture is an operating thread by how you run your business. It's as critical as your P&L, as your accounting and your reporting, as your revenue. So it has to be woven into how you run your business, how you make decisions, how you communicate to your employees, who you hire and who you fire. And so it's not something that you just set aside once you do it. It's a continuous part of how you run your business.
Yeah, that's
sorry for a long answer. I'm just so passionate about this stuff.
No, that's great, because it's not often that you have culture and strategy work that really takes hold like that. They're so sometimes they're really done poorly, and I've been associated with one where they've been done poorly, where the CEO writes his values on a piece of paper and hands it to me and said, "Good, our values exercise is done. Run with these." So to hear, so you're like, okay, well, I don't know how much this is really going to impact people, but to hear a company like Symantec and you and a leader go out and really make a statement and really connect all those things, I think it's really empowering for employees to hear that there are companies that really want to make a commitment to that work, and that's great to hear what happens, because a lot of times employees don't get a vision of that, so that's great. One of the things we talked about at the beginning was meditation, and I want to go back to that a little bit. Is if you're new to meditation or you're not comfortable with it, because I do think it's a really great skill. I've practiced it myself for many years. How do you help people get comfortable with it if it's new to them, or they think, oh my gosh, that's kind of that California meditation thing. What do I do?
Right.
How do you help people overcome some of the stigmas, or who might not be comfortable trying out? What would you recommend?
Well, I mean, meditation can be something as simple as taking a walk, quietly in the woods without your earbuds on, and just being within yourself. I mean, you don't have to go get an app, although I like guided meditation because I have a tendency to stray. But I kind of say, like, even like when I run, so I used to be a very avid runner. I'm trying to get back into it. Bad knees and a back get in the way sometimes. But I find even when I run is that rhythmic pace. And I start to think about really creative things, or I get things off my chest and I start to process things. And I remember when I was running lots of marathons, I'd come back after my morning runs, and then I come into work and my staff would go, oh crap, she went on a long run again because she has all these ideas. So you got to find what are you passionate about in terms of, thinking, reading, journaling, processing, and that in of itself can be meditative. And if you really want to meditate in a more, traditional way, there's lots of great apps. I use Headspace, which is a guided application that you can go as deep as you want or as light as you want. But over time, what I've come to realize is, when you meditate, you begin to neurologically rewire your brain in terms of how you react to things. So I did a meditation on anxiety, and I've never had anxiety before, but after COVID hit and I left Symantec, so I had all these grand plans to go travel and see my family and do cooking classes and all the things I never had time before, all that stuff went away. And so I was trying to figure out what is my purpose for someone who's worked for 3 decades, constantly working, raising a family. Suddenly I'm like, where do I add value? And so I started having some of that anxiety creep in. And that's when I started to go even deeper into my meditation, and I leveraged the app I just described. And so now, after 15 sessions at 15 minutes each, I kind of find when I start to get anxiety, my body begins to shift and change. My breathing adjusts, my mindset shifts. So it almost is like an auto reaction that is almost like breathing that plays in. So meditation isn't just it's going to help me for today. If done consistently and thoughtfully, it can be something that can actually rewire how you choose to act versus react to things.
Well, I think that's a big driver right there. If it can change how we react to things, especially in today's environment, that's a skill that, many of us want to acquire and be able to take on. So thank you very much for that. One of the things that, we're talking to our clients about is listening. And we're talking to our clients about the importance of being good listeners as consultants and as employees and as leaders. And sometimes it's overused as a soft skill to say, hey, I'm a good listener. Can you maybe reframe for us why the importance of being a good listener and listening with intent right now is so important, and just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I always kind of cringe when people talk about soft skills, like being able to collaborate and being able to communicate and, building trust, because those to me are so foundational. Those are as critical as and important as your ability to read a P&L statement, right, or a balance sheet. So in fact, I think they're even more important because they're things that actually thread the soft tissue together between, work and relationship. But I would say on the listening front, I'm a big proponent, and I've said this time and again, so if you've heard it from me before, forgive me, but this notion of Albert Einstein's views, if you're going to solve a problem, I'm going to take the first 55 minutes if I have an hour to solve a problem, I want to take the first 55 minutes, focus on actually figuring out what the problem is. It only takes me 5 minutes to then solve it. And I think listening helps you really get to the heart of what is going on and really getting clear about the problem there is to solve. And I think because we're all maybe at a pace now, and I think people are working even harder in the pandemic relationship to Zooms. I mean, I see my husband on calls from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. back to backs. And it's not because people are evil. It's just that's the way the working rhythm has earned itself. But you need to have time to really, before you jump into something, because you're just moving on to the next thing. Solving problems is not a task. It's really a process. And so to be able to solve problems well, you have to listen. You have to ask questions. You have to do the 5 whys. And then when you get clear about it, because you've listened thoughtfully, you've asked questions, you've had some give and take, then you can get really clear about the problem you're solving, and then you don't waste your time. So to me, listening is really, one, it's the right thing to do out of respect, but more importantly, it's about getting to better business solutions because you really got clear about what you're solving for. So it's a productivity strategy as well. So it's not just a nice thing to do, it's the thing to do to be a better business person and get to better outcomes.
Yeah, I think listening is so important. And I just think that there's people who do that really well. And there's also people that don't do that really well. And I think when you don't do that really well, it's a bigger handicap to you than you think. And so I always appreciate those people that are committed to listening and helping those people develop those skills. So it's really important to me.
And Jason, if I can just add, I'm certain you and I've been in situations talking to people where they're thinking about how they're going to respond to you. And you're like, no, but, and they just, I gotta get back at that. And it's like, they're not listening, and so your body language shows you this stuff when you're doing this. And so that also kind of turns people off as well. So if you could suspend having to respond and just ask another question or take it in before you put your perspective out, you're going to get to much better solutions and better relationships too.
If my daughter was here, she would tell you she's tired of hearing me tell her, listen with your ears, not with your mouth. So she would be really frustrated with this conversation because she gets so tired of me telling you got to listen better. That's an important skill set.
Keep going.
Yeah, exactly. I keep telling her that all the time. You may get annoyed by me right now, but down the road, you're going to appreciate that Dad told you to be a good listener. So, my wife used to drive a truck for Frito-Lay. Yes, I married a truck driver as one of her first jobs. And she still takes lessons away from that job to this day, being a Frito-Lay truck driver. And I know that one of your first jobs is working on the Frito-Lay factory floor. What lessons did you learn from that first experience that you could tell people who are just starting out or trying to get a job and, are laying the foundation for their career right now?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I went and got my undergraduate and then went right into grad school because the market was really bad at that time. And I stumbled upon this Master's of Industrial and Labor Relations, which is a career in HR. And so off of campus, Frito-Lay came on and we were all like, oh, we're not going to go work for Frito-Lay. What they make you drive trucks. Next thing I know, I get an offer to be an HR associate, which is a fast track HR program to really get you up to speed quickly so you can really contribute more effectively faster. And the first job they sent me to was to a manufacturing facility in Atlanta. So I was excited about Atlanta because I had grown up in a small town. So I get to go to the big city of Atlanta, but it was working in the oldest plant in the system. Also a plant that was very minority based, about 75% in Black, and very illiterate because the workers had been there for many, many years. And they were fantastic workers and basically were able to produce the product based on taste attributes. They could look at the chip to know if it had enough salt. They could taste it to make certain it had the right oil consistency. So they had natural intuitive capabilities for years of doing it, kind of like the 10,000 hours you've read about in some of the Malcolm Gladwell books. But when I got there, we had begun to introduce statistical process control, SPC, which is a Peter Deming or Paul Deming strategy around how do you get better and higher quality by using, process controls versus just, sort of human touch and feel. And so when I joined there, we were trying to retool a set of employees who could barely read, let alone start to do statistics. So it was a very humbling experience for me. I would drive the employees to literacy programs in the city. I would help them with how they were able to do these classes. I sat through the classes. And then as a result, some were able to flourish and grow, and others, unfortunately, were getting laid off. So I remember sitting across the table at the age of 22 from a 55-year-old man who'd been working there for like 30 years and having to let him know that we could no longer accommodate him and had to lay him off. And it was a very humbling time. So again, it taught me about empathy, but it also taught me about like how to deal with really tough business decisions and the intersection with human beings. and that aside, Frito-Lay, and I'm certain your wife would say the same thing, was a really fantastic learning ground because they made you learn the business. I drove a route truck. I helped merchandise products. I worked on the plant floor. I ate too much product off the line, but we'll talk about that later. But I did every aspect of these jobs. And so I learned what they are going through and, what it's like to get carpal tunnel, which was a issue with your wrists because of continuous lifting, et cetera. And I learned a lot about the business and around change management. So it's funny. I just ran into an old dear friend of mine who ended up running all of supply chain and procurement for Frito-Lay North America, which is a huge job. And she just retired. We still harken back to our days at Frito-Lay and how much we've learned and how it really helped establish us in terms of our business leadership. And in addition to the empathy and how you really think about an hourly contingent and a management contingent and how they work together effectively. So I look back at it with very fond memories.
Oh, that's great. And my wife says the same thing. She learned some really tough lessons that were good lessons for her that she still looks upon today. So as we talk a little bit about people who are starting to look for jobs, who are coming out of college post-pandemic, any advice that you would have for those folks right now from your standpoint as, the ex or the former CHRO for Symantec, what would you say to those folks?
Well, first, I just say I'm so sorry. I mean, it's just a bad time. I have two daughters. One was graduating from high school in May, and my other was graduating from 8th grade, going to high school. So they both missed their graduations, and they're now starting their first years in pivotal times in their lives online. So a microcosm because they're safe in our house and we're able to support them. But folks who are having to go work out of college, I'm sorry that you're finding yourself into this situation. I think what I would say is, first of all, if you can continue to build your capabilities, if it's more schooling or not, if you've got the luxury of being able to attend, that's kind of what I did. I went on to get my master's, and that really helped elevate me and open up more opportunities for me. If you're not unable to or don't want to pursue additional education, then I would say is any job is a good job in terms of the experience it's going to lend to you. It's going to help you get out and start to work and start to build, a resume, start to make connections. Networking is so critical. So, that notion of when you go apply for a credit card, it's best to do it when your credit's good, when you don't really need it, versus when your credit's really bad, it's hard to get that. Same thing with relationships and networking is start to build those relationships now, because maybe you don't need them now, but you might need them for the future and they may need yours. So I would say as someone who's graduating, go pound the streets. There are opportunities out there. They may not be the glamorous ones. Like, I had no idea I'd ever be wearing, a polo shirt, hairnet, and earplugs working in a manufacturing plant after getting my big master's degree. But I was grateful for having done that. And I'd say the same thing for new grads is go out there and get the experience. And it may not be the job, but it will give you the beginnings of building your resume and helping prepare you for the job when the time is right.
That's great advice. And lastly, our final question is, as a world-class HR leader and an influential thought leader in HR and business, what would you tell folks about what it takes to reach the pinnacle that you have achieved? Because it's very impressive how you've reached and the level that you've gotten to. What advice do you have for those people that are out there that want to do what you've done?
Well, thank you for that nice accolade. I'd say like always learn. Like, don't think you know it all, because if you think you do, you don't know it. Be open to fail, and I don't think it's really failing, it's learning. But like, it's okay to screw up. It's like fall down 7 times, get up 8. Like, know you're gonna have good days and not so good days, and it's less about what happened and how you react to it. Be true to yourself and your values. Like, if you become inauthentic, then your brand begins to get diminished, and then people don't want to work with you. So always, your say-do ratio is really, really critical. Last, I'd say, be humble, because there's too many people out there with big egos that people don't want to work with, and or they aren't going to be successful because they can't see enough of themselves. So be self-aware, know where you stand. And be willing to raise your hand also when there's, something that's inelegant or a messy, complex. That's when you're going to learn the most. And I can't tell you how many times I would raise my hand for the less glamorous jobs or the sticky, hard job, because I knew it would grow me and it would make me have to think differently, and it would actually, prepare me for what was next. So in summary, it's, be honest, be courageous, be perseverant, have a growth mindset, always be learning, and don't be afraid of taking risks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate you spending time with us. We know you're super busy and you've got a lot going on. So thank you so much. We're so happy to be able to share your thoughts and experience and leadership with our viewers. So thank you.
Oh, Jason, it's my pleasure, and I'm so pleased to see you in this new opportunity. I've known you for so many years, and you always grow and are doing new and different things. So you're also inspiring to me, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Amy. Have a great rest of your day. Talk to you later. All right, bye, guys.
Okay, take care.
See you on the next episode. Bye-bye.